Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in our disassembly of this APX Carry is first we're going to ensure that the gun is unloaded, and we do that not by looking to see that we can't see a round, but to see that we see there is no round. So we look where a round would be, that gun is unloaded and clear. So in this particular APX Carry, there is a decocking button. It's a safety feature so that you don't have to pull the trigger to take the gun apart. And you can use any kind of tool to just reach in there, press that button, you'll hear it click, and now that gun is able to be disassembled. You can use a variety of tools. You can use a dime to turn this. You can use a screwdriver, or you can use one of the edges of the follower of the magazine to reach in there and turn that. We're going to use a screwdriver, turn it, and that slide will come right off. Once the slide is off, you can reach here, push this forward, remove the recoil spring. You're going to take the barrel, you're going to lift it up, slide it forward, all the way up and back to remove the barrel. Here, we're going to take the slide completely apart. We're going to remove the striker mechanism. We're going to remove the extractor and the base plate. And this is a little tricky. So you're going to use a punch to push in here. Now, in this spot is just a spring that holds that extractor in place. So the tip of the punch is going to actually go down inside the spring, and it's going to capture the spring on the punch. You push down, and now as you're holding it down, you need to move this back, and I like to use a little Allen wrench in here to lock it in place as I do that. So you're going to take a tool like this screwdriver, or you can take a angled pick, slide it back, insert your Allen wrench to hold that in place. And you're going to slide this plate out. And see that spring comes out captured on that pick. Now, keeping your thumb back here so that the striker doesn't fly out, remove the back plate. Now you can pull the entire striker insert out, and you can slide the striker out. And you gotta kind of wiggle it just a little bit, and that will give you clearance on this extractor. Now there's a piece here on the back, and that is a disconnector for safety. You can see it pops up on the top. You have to align the striker. There's a little groove on that. Push that down, align that. Now you can pull the striker out, and now you can remove this piece directly out. Be careful, there's a spring in there. You can take out the extractor and take your pick. You can remove that spring. And then there's one more spring inside the extractor, or inside the striker channel. And you can pull that out. And that is full disassembly. All the moving parts have been removed from the slide. And to put it back, you just follow that same process in reverse. What I do though is I put this spring over the striker. I insert that back in. I take that spring and I put it on the leg of that safety disconnector. And again, you have to line those two up. Having some picks is great to help you get everything lined up. Take your insert. There's a little dimple on the end of the insert, and then there's a side that doesn't have it. The side that doesn't have it goes inside that striker. Okay, take our extractor, insert that back in. Okay. Take our spring that holds that in place. I mean, it's captured on there good. Slide that down in to hold that extractor. And then it's just a matter of you have to push these two pieces down as you reinsert the the plate. And what I found is if you push the striker assembly down first to get it started, and that will hold that striker assembly down, then you take your punch, press down, slide it all back together, just like that. To put the gun back together again, there's a couple little tricks you need to know. You're going to insert the barrel back in, push it forward, then come back. You're going to take your recoil spring. There's a little hole in the front, nothing in the back. This flat plate goes against the barrel locking lug, and you have to push it forward, and it will bite you if you get your finger in there wrong. Once that's in place, it just kind of sits there softly. It doesn't lock into place like it does on some guns. Insert onto the slide rails and come back. Now, this is the key here that you have to get right. To put this back together, you actually have to lock the slide back, and you have to turn this, and it calls for a quarter turn, but if you only turn it a quarter turn, you're gonna have this sticking out in the front. See how it sticks out in the front? And to get that back in, you just turn this a little bit more, and it will pop back in place. Cycle the slide a few times, point it in a safe direction, pull the trigger, hold the trigger, reset to make sure that everything has been assembled properly. This base plate is easily swapped out. So they have one base plate that has an extension on it for your pinky, and then they have a flush fit base plate, and it's a pretty simple procedure to remove that and swap it. You're going to take a punch, you're going to press this hole in the center, nope, not that far, slide that forward, capture this with your finger as you slide it forward so it doesn't go springing all over the place on you. Take the next one, slide it on while keeping downward pressure. Once you get to that little nub, you take your tool, push down on the follower from the bottom, slide it back, and it clicks right in place. So now you have a little bit of a place to rest your pinky as you hold that. To swap the magazine release, it is an ambidextrous magazine release. There's a little hole in the center here. You're going to take a pin, push that, and this little piece in the back will pop out. Remove that. And the whole assembly will come out. Okay, so then it can be reversed. You take the other side, push it there. Take the side that has the spring on it, put it on the side that you want the magazine release to live on. Push them together, take this pin that came out, pop it back in place, and now you have an ambidextrous or a left-hand sided magazine release. Very simple to reverse the magazine on. Give it a few tests. Make sure it's working properly. Okay. So the APX Carry comes with interchangeable frames, so you can change the color of the frames. I'm hoping at some point they come out with some sort of an accessory rail. Right now they don't have one, but you can do gray, olive drab, or desert tan. So we're going to show you how to get that insert out. It's a modular system, and we're going to show you how to remove the internals so that you can change the frame. Okay, so it's just like we did before. We're going to show that the gun is empty. We're going to close that. We're going to press the disconnector, take our tool, give it a half turn forward till it clicks, remove that, set the whole slide aside. So this internal piece right here is the part that's considered to be the gun. It has the serial number on that internal piece. The entire insides can come out so that you can swap out the grip, and we're going to show you how to do that. You are going to need a pick. You're going to need some punches so that you can punch out the pins. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the locking block. by just pushing it straight out. It slips right out like that. And the little piece underneath can fall out when you take this out, so just be aware of where that little curved piece goes. To get this pin out in the back, there's a spring that grabs one leg of it. There's a little notch in it, and that spring inside grabs it. So you're going to take your curved pick, reach inside, and lift that spring up and off of that pin, holding it back, and then I've got to push that pin out while I hold it back. But once you get that spring off of that little notch, then you can just go ahead and push that pin all the way out. And I like having a little parts tray to capture all these parts, kind of keep them organized. So those are the two main pieces that hold this module in place. Now, you do have to press the disconnector up a little bit to get it out of the frame. Get it this far and then stop. This slide catch, the slide lock right here, fits on a pin and has a notch that it slides into. That pin will fall completely out and that piece will come off when you remove this. The trigger connector is on a similar setup. It's this piece right here, and that will just fall off on you. So pay attention to where those go so you can put them back when you remove this entire piece. And I'm kind of holding that all in place as I take it out. So I'm holding the trigger connector, which attaches right here to a little pin on the side of the trigger. And it needs to line up back here with this piece and that disconnector. Okay? So when you put this all back together again, know where those go. See how that pin just fell out? It's not held in place, it just slides right in. And on the other side is a little notch on it, and that's where that slide lock goes. So it will slide right out, and that slide lock will come off. That pin can come off, and that trigger connector can come off. And then this pin goes right in here. This roll pin goes right in that slot. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is this plastic piece right here comes off. This is the piece that this rotates in. So know as you put this back in that the curve has to be facing up, and then there's a lip right here that fits flushly with the front of that fire control mechanism. You take your new slide or your new frame, whatever color you decide to go with, and you just put everything right back in it. Be careful, there's a little spring right there that you could lose. And that there's a slot for that right here. And it just fits back down in it. So to put this all back together again, you're gonna make sure that that front piece is in place. The little lips are lined up with the frame. Your pin behind the trigger goes in through that trigger spring. This pin goes back in place, and it does go all the way through. Once it's all the way through, you're going to take your slide lock. There's a little notch that goes into the frame. You're going to take your trigger connector. You're going to line it up on that pin on the trigger and make sure that it's in place so that it can disengage that spring back there. Holding that all together, make sure you put your trigger in first. Keeping everything held together. And as you do it, you have to push that disconnector in. Just kind of work everything back into place. Like so. Okay, so then you need to replace this pin, and you can see there's little notches on it, and there's one end that has material removed and the other end is flat. So the piece with the little notch is where that little spring is going to go, so you come in from this side. And while you do that, you need to take your spring and pull it back out of the way. Get it in, and it will clip back down onto that spot. You can see the trigger connector is moving. If I just push on this trigger, it's still moving because the piece that it corresponds with is in here. Everything's moving back, the hammer's moving back, nothing's coming apart. Okay, you replace this guy, and to make sure you can replace that, you need to make sure that plastic piece in the front is lined up. And you're just going to shove it right through, straight across. You might have to turn it just a little bit to help align it so that you can reattach the slide. And again, you're going to lock the slide open. Take your tool, turn that, bring it forward. And she's all back together again.